My name is Rod, and I am a 33-year veteran of a marriage, and still feel like that I have a lot to learn about this whole marriage experience. And I don't know if you're here today and you're not married for whatever reason, you might think, well, this message isn't for me. Let me just beg you to hold on for a moment. First of all, because marriage might be a part of your life at some point if it's not today. And the other is that many things that apply to the relationships of a marriage still apply relationally in many other relationships. Not 100%, not some of the things we're going to talk about today, but the majority of things are principles of relationships that work in about any context relationally. So hang with us, and you may need to pass this on to some friend of yours or something like that. Now, the truth is, anytime that we come upon a topic that is this big, and we're going to address it in one message as we're going through a series, there's been times in the past where I've done an entire 6-week, 8-week series on marriage, and still you feel like at the end there's more we could talk about, because it's an ongoing saga. It's a life dynamic, and so it's something that we're always living with, always dealing with. But what I specifically want to talk about today has to do with our topic at hand, and that is this moving from going crazy to being crazy. And all of us that have been in a marriage or are in a marriage right now, if we're honest with ourselves, we have to admit there are times whenever our marriage is driving us a bit crazy. Whenever we literally feel like, what have I done? I've signed on to this thing that is kind of a lifetime deal, and made this vow before God and other people, and I feel trapped, or I feel stuck, or I just feel like this is not working at all. And so how do we move from that over to the place of being crazy about our marriage? Now, the reality is, what we know is that we can feel both of those feelings even in the same day. You know, your emotions can go such that you're actually, within a given day, feeling crazy about your marriage, and then it's driving you crazy, and you can be back and forth. But oftentimes we go through seasons, and then some of those seasons where it's kind of driving us crazy, the things that we do or do not do in that time period will significantly impact the outcome, ultimately, of our marriage. And so what I'm going to share with you today is information that I have attached myself to probably beginning about close to 20 years ago as a pastor. And where there was some material that began to impact me in my own personal life, began to impact my counseling with other people, and there are a lot of wonderful Christian psychologists out there that have a lot of wonderful things to say about marriage. In fact, when I was kind of narrowing this passage down, or this message down, I had about 25 books on marriage. Just brought them out in the lobby, kind of put them all on the table. I'm like, I've got so many, you can go so many different directions with this. We could easily spend today just on communication, and it still wouldn't be enough time for us to really cover that adequately. We could talk about compatibility. We could talk about things like our expectations, or all kinds of things. We could just take and just zero in on that. What I really want to do is summarize some things that I have found very helpful to me personally, and also to other people. And most of it comes from a common source by a gentleman named Dr. Willard Harley, who probably is best known for his book called His Needs, Her Needs. And we've had some people years and years ago when he took that some of the guys, I think, Dwayne, for some reason, your name pops to my mind here, is said, after going through the class, he goes, I'm thinking you named they named the book the wrong name. I said, what is that? And he goes, it's Her Needs, Her Needs. Now, so I've had varying responses from people all through the years, and I think Dwayne's still willing to argue that or whatever. But here, let me tell you this. What I believe firmly is that all 10 of the needs that he talks about are common needs we all have, and if you will be honest with each other about those needs, you will truly find that that oftentimes you're not hitting on the same, 6 cylinders or whatever. You're on different pages, so to speak, on what your needs are. And if you don't understand that difference and try to work toward connecting at those places of need, then it really impacts negatively your marriage. Now, I used to talk a lot about, in maybe counseling and that kind of talk about the 10 different needs that everybody has, but I don't talk about it so much anymore. It's kind of a philosophy that I've come on just from this and from reading the scripture and from this experience and everything else, and that is this, that even though marriage is a complicated relationship in many ways, there are some ways that you can make it simpler. And some of the simplicity of marriage is this. It isn't knowing everything about your spouse. It isn't knowing everything that you could or should do, but it is knowing some of the most important things about your spouse, and it is knowing what you should do in regard to those most important things. My opinion is this. If I have 10 needs, and if I were to list those 10 needs in a sequence, and if my spouse then spends most of her time focusing on the last 3 of those needs, 8, 9, and 10, that I'm going to have a tendency to still feel needy. Because even though she's focusing on my needs, she's not focusing on the priorities of my needs. Now, if she were to focus on those first 3 at the top of the list and make that kind of her life mission, and I flip it around, me doing the same, I may not even care if the other 7 needs are not met. It may not even really matter. Because it may, you can see right down you go, well, yeah, I prefer this or I prefer that. But if we feel like our emotional needs are met, the most critical, the most important ones, then there's a sense of satisfaction that comes from the relationship that is hard to have any other way. And so I'm going to just give you your memory verse, and this is just a portion of this verse, but it's a portion that I'd like for you just to have in your mind. Marriage is to be held in honor among all. Marriage is an honorable thing. So if you're a married person today, you can just say to yourself or someone near you, I'm in an honorable relationship. This is an honorable thing before God. Marriage is to be held in honor among all. And so that is I'm not really preaching from that passage of Scripture. I'm going to start with a variety of Scripture, then we're going to go, when we go to the his needs, her needs section of it, we're going to go to one specific passage and kind of base it out of there. And so let's start with some love busters. Love busters that drive people crazy in marriages. These are not in any given order. They're just, they're there. And so the first one is this, angry outburst. Angry outburst. James 1:19 says, "This you know, my beloved brethren, but everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger." If you have a quick temper, and if you have angry outbursts, all that does is shove people away. And in fact, oftentimes people use anger to push people away. It's a pretty good technique. If you have angry outbursts, it's going to be a fact that people are going to be kind of pushed away from you. Nobody likes to hang out with an ogre. And so, if you have angry outbursts, don't be surprised if the atmosphere in your home is a bit chilly. Don't be surprised if your spouse doesn't want to, snuggle with you. Don't be surprised if the kids are a little bit timid around you. Angry outbursts drive people away. And they're relationship busters. They don't do anything to build and to encourage and strengthen relationships. They rip and tear at them. It's like strong gusts of winds that tear things up. And the damage is there. You can work on repair, and repair is a good thing, and everything else. But angry outbursts will cause serious destruction within a marriage. And so it will drive people away. Number 2, disrespectful judgments. Matthew 7 says, "Do not judge so that you not be judged. For in the way you judge, you will be judged. And by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you." Disrespectful judging is just simply jumping to conclusions that you do not have any idea really are true or not. Now, I'm not talking about if you know something's absolutely true. I mean, if there's a dent in the car and your spouse drives in and there's a dent in the car, and you go, there's just a dent in the car. What happened? Oh, nothing happened whatsoever, and then it is lying to you with you're not judging somebody whenever it's obvious something has happened or there's obvious something is wrong. You're not judging somebody, but it is easy when we're in a relationship to jump an awful lot of conclusions and in a very disrespectful way conclude an awful lot of things about each other that may or may not be true. But disrespectful judging is not appropriate, and it will, again, drive a wedge in between. Now, number 3, annoying behavior. Annoying behavior. Now, I know some people go, well, that's just how I am. I mean, if they can't accept me how I am, then too bad. Most annoying behavior probably is not only annoying to your spouse, probably be annoying to anybody, okay? Unless your spouse is just super, super picky. But annoying behavior, it can be all kinds of things. We can sit here and talk about some of the lighthearted things, like whether you put the roll of toilet paper on coming from the top or coming from the bottom. Those kinds of things, if you can't work your way through that, you probably don't have much of a chance, So I'm not going to get hung up there. But here's what I am saying is this. Someone that you're married to tells you, that annoys me. That really gets on my nerves. But you continue to do it without even seeming any consideration for their feelings whatsoever. For you to give those big, long burps at the table with the kids sitting there, that annoys me. And they just keep on burping, maybe burp more. And you say, Rod, is that? No, the reason I'm hesitant to even give any examples, because then you'll think, well, that's the one. No, it's not. It can be anything. It can be anything. What annoys? Now, if you're just being a picky person, that's one thing. But if it's something that really kind of almost grates your spouse like chalk does, then if you really love that person, you'll work on not annoying them so much. And if you just continue to annoy them, it just drives a wedge. It's a love buster. Number 4, selfish demands. Philippians chapter 2 says, do nothing from selfish or empty conceit, but with humility of mind regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interest, but also for the interest of others. Now, it doesn't say don't look out for your own interests, and the Bible's clearly over and over certainly never tells us that we should, that we're to go around beating up on ourselves or putting ourselves down. It's simply saying don't elevate ourselves above other people. Don't make ourselves better than other people. Don't demean who we are, but it says, don't just merely look out for your own personal matters, meaning you should look out for your own personal matters, interests, but also for the interests of others, in particular for your spouse, because the Bible says we become one flesh. And so when your spouse is hurting, is suffering, is going through anything, then what you do is you actually feel that for them. You feel the pain of that with them. Selfish demands is whenever we are looking out only for ourselves and we see our spouse only as someone to serve our needs, period. That's it. It's not this reciprocal give and take where there's an equal sense of effort that is put into it. And when I say equal, I'm not saying that anybody's keeping score. I'm just saying where both of you are fully committed to meeting each other's needs. Selfish demands. It's very hard for us sometimes to see what those selfish demands are. I'm going to recommend that whenever you have an opportunity, that you take these love busters, and I know we haven't talked about the 5th one yet, but you take these love busters and that you do this with them. That you sit down with each other, allow at least an hour, possibly 2 hours, and that you sit down with each other and you ask your spouse how you're doing with each of these. And they may have it wrong if they say, well, I think that your anger outbursts are just too much, too often, too whatever. You may disagree with that, but you can talk through it, hopefully without having another anger outburst. But I would like to encourage you to grade each other on this and be open. Be open toward each other. If you're not in a place where you can do that, just file this away whenever you can, okay? Whenever Dave and Marie are doing a date night, because they give you 4 hours, 6 to 10 o'clock, when they're doing the date night thing here. Go get you something to eat at a fancy Italian restaurant, if you're smart, guys. And then allow time at a coffee shop to sit down and ask these questions. Do it in public. It'll help keep the anger levels down, You do it in public. It really will. It make a big difference, I promise you. Then they just have to grit their teeth and go, if you say that to me, Anyway. Number 5, dishonesty. Ephesians 4:15 says, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in all aspects into him who is the head, even Christ. Sometimes we feel like, well, if I hide the truth from my spouse, it'll protect them. That'll protect them. Do you know that the truth, it doesn't ultimately, that's not what causes the damage. Truth can hurt very much, but the truth is not what causes damage. Dishonesty causes damage. Truth gives room for healing. When the truth is spoken, even if it's something awful that's being spoken in the sense of, sharing what has happened or what we've done or that kind of thing, or being transparent with our spouse, it may seem like this is hurtful and it may hurt, but it gives an opportunity for trust to be rebuilt. Where there's dishonesty, there's no room for trust to be rebuilt. And so dishonesty is true, I wasn't gauging these, but it might truly be the most significant love buster on this list. Because if you don't trust each other, you don't have much to work with. It starts with being honest. And being honest may mean you're even worlds apart for the moment, but honesty builds a bridge that you can walk on. And I have to tell you, I believe once people get honest, it's a game changer, it's a life changer. It begins to put not only us personally before God in a good place, but it puts us with other people relationally in a powerful place. And sometimes it's a crazy hard road to go, but it's always the best road. Number 2, we're going to talk about how you handle your spouse's felt needs and how that determines which side of crazy you live on. Which side of the street are you on? You over here in crazy land with your marriage, or are you over here where you're actually crazy about your marriage? And a lot of this is built around whether or not you're paying attention to or how you're handling your spouse's felt needs. Now, I want you to look at this passage of Scripture. Now, men, there'll be a tendency for you to want to memorize this and use it as your favorite verses in the Bible, and that's okay. But remember, this is the only thing the Bible says, okay? And so this is a pretty straightforward scripture about husbands and wives fulfilling each other sexually and fulfilling the needs of each other sexually, and making sure that it is a regular habit in your lives. And so let's just look here at what Paul says. But because of immoralities, each man is to have his own wife, and each woman is to have her own husband. The husband must fulfill his duty to his wife, and likewise also the wife to her husband. And that, in the context here, is really specifically speaking about a sexual relationship. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, also the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Stop depriving one another, except by agreement for a time. You might want to underline that. By agreement for a time. So that you may devote yourselves to prayer. In other words, the only really good, legitimate reason to not be engaged on a regular, consistent basis with each other sexually as a couple is if you're devoting yourself to prayer, specifically in the same sense as fasting. So what Paul is saying here is you need to make sure you don't just use any kind of excuse you can come up with for not being together sexually, but you need to make sure that it's something that you're saying we are agreeing together to fast this for a reason, such as for a prayer concern, and we are doing this so that there can be a complete focus on what we're praying about. And then come together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Now, in this situation that Paul is addressing here, he's talking to husbands, wives, talking about fulfilling their each other's needs, and the specific context is sexually. Don't deprive each other of that, and don't go long periods of time without coming together for various reasons. And certainly one of the dominant ones here, it opens up a lot of temptation to people. And so the reason I want to use this passage really for the next piece of our conversation is this, because I don't believe it is any kind of a stretch to basically say this, that anything that is a felt need of a spouse is something that you should just lightly ignore. It's not something you should just say, well, that's how they feel. It doesn't really matter to me. I believe that however one person feels in a marriage is the other person doesn't have to feel that way, but they have to acknowledge it. In other words, that's what we call validating. Whenever you won't even acknowledge that this person feels that way or that they have the right or possibility of feeling that way, basically what you're doing is invalidating their feelings. And if there's anything that cuts deeper than about anything else in our lives, is whenever someone invalidates us as a person. And in particular, if a spouse does. Whenever we're invalidated, it means that someone does not take our request seriously, does not take our voice seriously. It means that they do not take the time to consider what we would have to offer or say, and they somehow just write it off as foolishness or as of no concern or of nothing else, of not a matter to them. A person who feels invalidated is a person who's oftentimes deeply hurt. And when that person is deeply hurt, then oftentimes they react and respond in unhealthy ways. And so it's very, very important. And I want to just say right now, I'm kind of cutting out everybody else, and I'm cutting it down to a marriage right now, to you and your spouse if you're married, and because this kind of thing, our reactions, our response, all that is very different to people depending on who they are to us in relationship, and so and even different from a parent to a child here. So we're talking specifically right now marriage relationship. So let me just have you look at the list that's below, and I'm going to go down through, and I'm going to fill in the blanks for you. Then we're going to talk about it. And this is a list that Dr. Harley came up with after 25 years of marriage counseling. He went back through his files and he said, let's categorize the top needs that seem to come up over and over and over again. And then he categorized them toward the top ones as far as frequency, and that's where he came up with this list. Now, this list doesn't show that. This list is a list. And so I want you to just fill in the blanks as you go. Number one's affection. This is not necessarily in a given order. It is in some degree, like men and women, but I'm not going to go there right now. I'm just giving you the list. Number one, affection. Number two, sexual fulfillment. Number three, conversation. Now, let me just real quickly on those three. Affection specifically is talking about non-sexual words and touch. It's where again it may lead to that, but affection, particularly in itself, is where it's not about sexual fulfillment, about sexual activity. It's about just loving and showing affection toward that person, in verbal and physical kinds of ways. Sexual fulfillment obviously speaks for itself, except we have to understand the word fulfillment. There's a difference between people just having sex and having sexual fulfillment. Sexual fulfillment has to do with two people actively engaged, and they are endeavoring to fulfill each other, not just being done in some kind of a selfish manner. Number three is conversation. That has to do with communication, talking, listening. And if you remember the James passage we just looked at just on the flip page, it's slow to speak, slow to anger, quick to listen. Listen's got to be the big piece. The best gift you can never give to anybody is to listen to them, hear them out. Number 4 is recreational companionship. Number 5, honesty and openness. Number 6, attractiveness of spouse. And if you ever hear somebody say, well, I don't, my spouse doesn't have to be attractive. Well, nobody's saying anybody has to be a model on the front of a magazine. But you know what? I think we all appreciate our spouse taking care of themselves and looking the best they can. I had an aunt by marriage, and just thinking, I've yet to be, whenever with the web, and now we're starting to leak some of the messages out on YouTube, and eventually we'll be live streaming the service. You have to be a little bit more careful about who you talk about when they're not here, So I'm pretty sure this aunt of mine's, they're not going to listen, but anyway. But she used to, and I'm not going to say who she is, but which one she is, and I got a lot of aunts. But sometimes she used to she lived near where I was when I was growing up as a kid, and sometimes I'd see her in her night coat, 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something, going out to, man, as a kid, I'm thinking, why did that woman get her clothes on? Why did she dress, And it was one of those, it's old, you know what I'm saying? It just looked like it could have been in a haunted house, kind of night coat, kind of thing. It's long flowing, and slippers on. I'm like, whew. I was just really glad. Anyway, Vanjie gets up in the morning and she makes that bed and she gets herself, whether she's going out the door or not, she gets herself ready for the day. And I'm grateful for that. That's all I can say. So, don't look good for everybody else and not your spouse. That's what I'm saying. Don't look good for everybody else and not your spouse. Number 7, financial support. And that's a huge one. It's one of the things we do to try to help people get on the same page with that is Financial Peace University. Number 8, and some of the stuff Tom talks about. I know, Tom, you got me in trouble this morning. He went through 20 points in 5 minutes. Come on, man, I can never do that. I would never be able to. Don't do that again. You can only do 3. If you do it in 5 minutes, you only do 3 points, not 20 in 5 minutes, because, I will never accomplish that. Domestic support is number 8, and that's where you help each other. No one feels alone in this deal of raising a family. Family commitment tied into kind of the domestic support, different a little bit. I'm going to give you the full definitions of this, not full, but fuller definition of this when you leave, because I want you to take them with you. I rarely give homework assignments, but I'm going to at least give it to you. Whether you do it or not is up to you, and you'll be on your own. Admiration, number 10. Admiration. Now, I will tell you this, that in Dr. Harley's analysis, that for men, and the top 5 things that he listed, he put admiration as number 5 for men. And I do have, I haven't met him personally, and we haven't sat down and talked, and so I can't say, I've had this argument with him. And the problem I have more and more, the older I get, every book I read, I want to go meet the author and I want to argue with him. Now, I take all kinds of stuff and I'm like, yes, but then there's these pieces I want to sit down and I want to have an argument with. Not try to have an argument, I'm just saying I want to have a discussion with them. And go, now what did you mean by this? And give me a little bit more evidence for why you drew this conclusion. And so I don't know altogether why he ended up with that as number 5, but I believe this. The older a man gets, and what I mean by older, by the time they hit their early 30s, there's something inside a man that may want to be admired more than anything else in life. And in particular, they want to be admired by their spouse and by their children. And I know a lot of wives might say something like this, well, when they do something I can admire them for, then I will admire them. Not a good answer. And I believe women like to be admired too, and I don't mean that wrong, but I'm saying for guys, when you get the sheet, I'm going to give you a little bit later, I need you to understand, I actually kind of have a disagreement with, I think that one fights for number one for men. That's just my personal opinion, and after my experience of working with people, then I think that fights for number one men, especially once they kind of settled into a marriage and into a life, being a family man. I believe that one becomes huge. And so I'm going to just say, from my own experience, please don't overlook that or let that be one left kind of down the list too far. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do with this, okay? Because this is way too extensive for me. I mean, he wrote a whole book on it. He's written all kinds of sub-books on it, all kind of, this is not something we're gonna fully resolve here today. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you to do this. The list that you have in front of you, to the best you understand what those words mean, I would like for you, from 1 to 5, just 1 to 5, you put down what you think is the most important felt need you have, and the second to that, most important felt need you have, and go down to 5. Don't do all 10, just go to 5. And so you can do that right now, or you can do that later. I don't care. But I would ask you to do this. We're going to hand you a sheet at the end of the service. If you do it later, please don't read the sheet first. Because here's what that sheet is straight from Dr. Harley's material, and it lines it up what he put: men top 5, women top 5. I do not want that to influence your thinking, okay? What it will do is give you a little bit of a description for what those are, so after you've looked at it, you might change your mind. But I'd like for you to try to write down the top 5 or mark the top 5 for you. You just go, these are my top 5, I know it. And I would say don't over struggle with it, don't whatever, because really, here's what I'm gonna, once you have done that, then I'm gonna ask you to take the sheet that you're gonna get at the end of the service, and the reason you don't have it now is because I didn't want you trying to read it right now, okay? And once you've marked your top 5, then I want you to look at that sheet and see a little bit of a description about each of those, and go, yeah, no, and go, and then go back and say, yeah, that's it, or it's not. Once you've done that, I want you to make sure you and your spouse both have done that. Marked your top 5, read the description, small description. So anybody, if you whatever category you fell in up here at Tom's deal, if you don't read it all or hardly read, you can still read these little descriptions. Read those descriptions, verify that's how you feel. Go ahead and say, yep, that's it. Then here's what I want you to do from there. Just circle the top 3. Circle the top 3. And then I'd like for you to sit down with your spouse and discuss how you feel and how you feel things are going with regard to that. Both of you, not just one of you, both of you. And if you have to toss the coin to see who goes first, that's okay. And what you could do is you could go, one of you go on the first one, the next will go on the first one, the other was second, the second go down. And this isn't about putting each other on the defensive, it's about creating understanding of what our true needs are. Because here's a challenge. There have been times whenever I've been trying to help somebody, and then somewhere along the line, they opened up in a different kind of way and found out what I was trying to help them with wasn't really their main concern. Their main concern was this over here. And so this was of little to no avail, because it didn't matter that much to them, but this was really what was going on. Well, oftentimes we feel like we're guessing a little bit in marriage relationships. And we think we're doing the right thing. We think we're helping. We think we're making a difference. But wouldn't it be better if we just knew? If we just simply knew? Now, don't expect magic to happen just because you revealed this. And just for instance, if for whatever reason, you said on there, to your spouse, conversation, if you're a female, and you said to your husband, conversation's my number one need, that he's going to turn into a communication genius overnight. That he's just going to come home the next day and go, well, what's on your list to talk about for the next 3 hours? I mean, I want to meet your need for conversation. So I'm engaged, I'm here, I'm ready, it won't happen like that. But what will happen is there's awareness that as you're trying to communicate and trying to share, that you can say to your spouse, remember his needs, her needs, or whatever it was that Rod was talking about. Remember I mentioned that conversation was one of my big needs. I just want to talk. Because see, sometimes us guys, here's what we're afraid of from a talk. We're afraid that we're going to be given 6 things to do. We're going to be in trouble for something. And that somehow we're going to be asked to solve something that seems way beyond our ability to solve. And that it just seems like we're having to have a meeting of Congress where it's just maybe she just wants to converse with you. Maybe she just wants to share with you. But because there are a couple things that were said in that drama that we're dead on, and one of them is this. If your wife says, if she comes in, she wants to talk to you all about a problem she had at school. I remember when Vanjie first started teaching middle school, man, she'd come home with some stories, and I'm like, my initial thought was always like, well, I'll listen carefully, I'll take good notes, and I'll tell her how to fix that, And after a while, I began to realize she's just kind of telling me how her day went. And so to this day, oftentimes, whenever one of us start to tell a story, we'll preface it by saying, I'm just wanting to share this with you. I'm not asking you to fix it. And so something just a little things like little techniques like that can go a long way. Just say, I'm not asking you to fix anything. I just want to tell you how I'm feeling. Whew, that's good. And that it's hard, guys, particularly for us to shut off that side because we still want to come back with, well, I'd tell them this, I'd do that, I'd do blah, blah, blah. We still want to give advice. Just relax. Let them talk. Stay awake. But let them talk. And so what I want you to do, and I'm going to review this real quickly, I want you to identify your top 5. And the reason I'm having you identify your top 5 because you might switch your top 3 once you read the sheet that's handed out to you, those top 5, verify that your top 3 are really your top 3, circle them, and that's what you sit down and talk to each other about. And if you need additional help, all you have to do is go out and buy the book, His Needs, Her Needs. Dwayne's got an extra one he'll give you. Since he's done with his, he'll give it to you if you need it. And so see him after church, and he'll hand you, no. Okay. Yeah. Well, whichever one fits your, and I think there's one about women are waffles and men are pancakes or something too. I don't know. So whatever the one that dispel, kind of shows the difference best. I'm not. What I do know is I know Dr. Harley is a believer, and that's kind of the base for that. Thanks for that additional. There's another book you can get if you think it would help you or it would suit you better. But there's tons of help with regard to this stuff. But if you don't talk about it, if you don't share with each other, there's a song out there that talks about being ships in the night. And we can end up being ships in the night and wondering why is this not working? Why is this not working? Whenever sometimes the fix is a lot less complicated than what we want to make it to be. I'm not saying it's not hard. It is. Last thing I want to share with you is just a word to the wise. And this is something that is, to me, one of the most important exercises that a couple can have in their marriage relationship. If you follow the policy of joint agreement, again, something Dr. Harley invented, or at least put together in this way. And here's the principle, or the policy. Never do anything without an enthusiastic agreement between you and your spouse. And I know the initial thought some of you are having is, nothing will ever happen. Nothing will ever happen. But this is like a dead end right here. We're at the dead end. Whenever it says never do anything, remember it does say anything what? Without an enthusiastic agreement. It doesn't mean you can't do anything. It's just you have to enthusiastically agree beforehand. Most of us try to do it differently than this. You go buy the boat. then you come home and try to explain it and defend it and say, well, this is why we needed this. I'm telling you, I did this for our family. I promise you. Yeah, but you didn't even mention it to me. Now, I know most of you wouldn't do that, okay? So most of us are ahead of that game. But what about the money that's missing in the account? You'll end up like the money changer guy trying to say you're acting like Jesus if you don't come to an agreement about, whatever, I call the money you have during the week that's just sort of whether you want to buy, you want to spend it on the whatever calories, the good or the bad calories or something else in your pocket, like money, pocket money. Make an agreement ahead. I need this amount and I need this much for pocket money and everything else. But so it doesn't mean like you have to come home and admit you ate 3 candy bars or something, you spent, but you have a certain amount you just agreed to. This is kind of what you can spend, and you come to agreement. The deal is this: it's not about trapping people, it's about setting us free. If you want the right kind of relationship, you'll put in the effort to make sure that you're not doing things that work against your marriage, you're endeavoring to do things that work for it. Now, I would have to tell you that Dr. Harley has an entire book written on this topic, so to think that this one statement is explanation enough, and let me tell you what the book is, in case you want to go get it and read it. It's called Give and Take. Give and Take. It'll allow you to more fully understand this whole concept, because I know it's if you've never heard it before, you're thinking, Rod, I love you and everything. Man, you were out there. I'm just telling you, follow it and be amazed. Follow it and be amazed.